Breaking tonight, 48 hours from the pick that could define the future of the Supreme Court. Hello and welcome to Justice. I'm Jeanie Pirro. Thanks for being with us tonight. And thanks again for making Justice #1 again last week. What a show on deck. CPAC Chair Matt Schlapp is here. So is Tomi Lahren, and a powerful political panel with David Avella and Chris Hahn. We'll be discussing the president's big decision on the Supreme Court on Monday night and more. But first, just how badly were the feds out to get Donald Trump? And where does the House Intelligence investigation stand now? Joining me to discuss that and more is the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Republican Congressman Devin Nunes. All right, good evening, Congressman.
Judge, great to be with you.
Well, it's great to have you on tonight. You know, yesterday you sent yet another letter to Congressman Gowdy and Goodlatte asking that they question individuals openly in this continuing alleged Trump-Russia collusion investigation. And now it appears that your letter includes up to 42 letters, some of them from the executive office of President Obama, as well as the State Department and DOJ and FBI. What is different about your third letter?
Well, the third letter is about Fusion GPS and all the people that are in that realm of Fusion GPS that could have been involved handling the dossier, digging up the dirt, and feeding it into the FBI.
And right now, in terms of this information going to the FBI, it seems that you went from the initial, who paid for this dossier? What was it all about? And you seem to have gotten answers to that. We know it was the DNC and Hillary Clinton, the Hillary Clinton campaign. But now the issue seems to be a little more fine-tuned. And that is, how did this dossier get from, the Clinton campaign and Steele to the FBI? Do you know what the answer to that is?
We don't know the answer to that. We think it could have come from many directions, right? So we know that one of John McCain's former staffers did it. We think that many people in the press had this and actually also gave it to the FBI. At the same time, Christopher Steele was supposedly working with the FBI. So there's lots of ways that it made it through. So what we're really asking for, though, is for these 42 people to be interviewed in public. I would suggest I can't control how they do the interviews and conduct the interviews, but I would think that they would want to do more deposition type. So let the Republicans ask an hour of questions of these of the witness at a time, then let the Democrats give them an hour. Have it be televised, because these 42 people really help us get to the bottom of, was Trump really colluding with Russia, or was this an orchestrated effort by the left, working with the FBI and DOJ to frame the president and many people involved, to dig up dirt to start this investigation? Well, and that's why I think it would be helpful to have all this done in public.
Well, clearly in public. But when you talk about a deposition, that is somewhat different than the run-of-the-mill hearing where, the right gets up and says, I'm the greatest guy who ever lived and you're awful, or the left gets up and says, we're the greatest guys who ever lived and you're awful. You never get answers from these witnesses. It's almost like a circus. It's the same all the time. You think that a deposition will get into more in-depth information? Will it allow for the basis of a criminal predicate prosecution in the event that they lie?
Yeah, and I also believe, Judge, that there's a task force that the Oversight Committee and the Judiciary Committee have set up, made up of 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats. So let each one have an hour at a time to ask questions of these witnesses so that you don't get the grandstanding, you don't get the political speeches. I think that would be worth a lot more for not only the Congress, but ultimately the American people to understand what information each witness has that's relevant to this matter.
Okay. And, Congressman, one of the things that I find so fascinating is that the House, I believe it was last week, gave the Department of Justice until yesterday to give them information, this House resolution, or a deadline for DOJ and the FBI to come clean on the beginning of the Trump investigation, or as the FBI called it, Operation Hurricane. Do you know, number one, did Congress get any information from the FBI and DOJ? And number two, if they didn't, where are we with this?
Well, as always, we have to pound and pound and pound to get information from DOJ and FBI. They did give us a lot more information last week. We're expecting more information on Monday. But let me, you mentioned something about Crossfire Hurricane that we know was open July 31st. One of the key outstanding questions that we have is what actually happened before July 31st.
Okay, but
so
Congressman,
they seem to be playing these word games about this.
Hold on, Congressman, hold on. What I want to know now is if they don't give you that information, and maybe we can pull the congressman back up, if they don't give you that information, what can you do to the FBI and DOJ? You've given them more deadlines. Now we had yesterday they were supposed to give us stuff. Now maybe Monday or Tuesday. This investigation's been going on for a year. At some point, don't you guys feel impotent?
Well, look, there's a couple things here. So before July 31st, for a couple months now, we've been really zeroing in on that. And the FBI and DOJ have had plenty of opportunities to tell us what happened before July 31st.
But they haven't.
They have not.
Right.
They have not. They have not. Now, ultimately here, the president of the United States, it's his DOJ and his FBI. And at some point here, he needs to get involved. And look, were there informants?
You know what, Congressman? I don't want to go there yet. I don't want to go there yet. Here's the thing. You guys have oversight over the Department of Justice. I know you're intel. I get that. The American people have been watching this circus play out where you guys tell the DOJ and the FBI, we want these records. You then go through the charade, not you in particular, Congressman, of sending a letter and saying, we want this by Friday. You don't get it on Friday. Maybe we'll get it Monday or Tuesday. What my viewers want to know, what the American people want to know, with all due respect to you, and I don't think anyone has had more pushback than you, and for that I give you tremendous kudos. I really do. But it's almost as though Congress shouldn't even bother at this point. And we can talk about the president, but what do you have in terms of a sanction? Otherwise, you guys should be working on legislation.
Well, look, ultimately, we have the job of oversight. Okay, they have to comply with us. They've slowly complied. And look, part of what we've uncovered here, let's not forget, it's Congress that's helped help uncover the dossier, the dirt, who paid for it. It's just been, look, when people are trying to hide this, like the Democratic Party and the Clinton campaign were trying to hide in conjunction with the FBI and DOJ didn't want the American public to know any of this. So we do have a few outstanding documents that they do need to give us. Okay, it's very, very important. So, you know, what steps do we have? Look, we have other steps we can take. We can hold in contempt. But at the end of the day here, we do need to know what happened before July 31st. That's what we're really trying to get to.
Right.
If you look at phase 3 of the investigation, like we talked about just a moment ago, having the 42 people come and testify, I think will be very powerful for the Congress and for the American people to have transparency and sunlight in this whole mess.
But what we're looking at on that full screen is the beginning of what the FBI and the DOJ says is the investigation into the President Trump. July 31, 2016, then candidate Trump. If FBI and DOJ, right where that middle line is, say that's when we began the investigation, and you now find out that a counterintelligence investigation was started against a presidential campaign a week after the guy gets a nomination to be Republican candidate for president, and in fact is before that, then we've got a counterintelligence at the level of a third world country.
That is correct. So I think any involvement, even in Crossfire Hurricane, of informants being paid to go into the Trump campaign is something that a red line that we've never crossed before. But what could be even worse is if there were informants that were being run into Trump and a Trump campaign and their associates before July 31st, which would be even worse. So this is why at the end of the day, we have to hold these hearings, we have to ask these questions, and ultimately, the President of the United States is going to have to declassify all this information so the American public knows exactly what the counterintelligence resources that we have in this country, what they were used for.
Why do you think the president is not? Why do you think the president is not declassifying?
I don't know. The FISA is very frustrating to me because I think that pieces of the FISA that was got on Carter Page, right? That we've had an ongoing feud about this for many, many months. I think the FISA is totally fraudulent, 100% fraudulent. You have James Comey and others currently at the FBI and DOJ who are defending the FISA, which is unbelievable to me. So why not? The president ought to just solve this once and for all. Declassify. You don't have to expose sources and methods, but most of that FISA, the pertinent parts of it, could be declassified, and he could help answer for all of us who was telling the truth. Were they justified to get a FISA warrant on Carter Page or not? I don't think they were, and I think the American people have a right to know, and the president should declassify it.
All right. Congressman Devin Nunes, we'll see what the president does, although I suspect he's kind of waiting for you guys to use all of your powers. But it would certainly put an end to this ongoing investigation. But I want to thank you for all your efforts on behalf of getting out the truth and putting some sunlight into our government. Congressman Chairman Devin Nunes, thank you so much. And by this time on Monday, we should know for sure who President Trump has picked to nominate the Supreme Court, a decision that could have a major impact on this country for decades to come. Joining me now to discuss that and more is CPAC Chairman Matt Schlapp. Good evening, Matt.
Great to be with you, Judge.
All right, Matt. I'm just going to ask you a follow-up question to my questioning of Chairman Nunes, where he believes that the president at this point should intervene and declassify information because the FBI and the Department of Justice are simply playing games with Congress. And, Congress has been pretty impotent up to this point. What do you think?
I like the idea. I think the problem, this whole question about Russian collusion, the Mueller investigation, and what happened with all the hanky-panky with the FISA courts, I think the American people deserve just to see the straight facts. And I'm not sure we're going to get it any other way. I'm not sure Congress can get it. So I do think it's a fair charge back to the executive branch. Make these documents public. The taxpayers should know.
Yeah, well, they really should know, but it's been, it seems, an ongoing battle where you have someone like Tom Fitton and some other guys who have to go to court to get more than Congress has, which is kind of crazy under Freedom of Information. However, let's talk about 48 hours from now when the president gets on national television and announces who his pick will be for the United States Supreme Court. Now, let me preface all this with a couple of thoughts. Number one, Ronald Reagan was able to put 3 judges on the Supreme Court. And there are Republican presidents like Bush Sr., who put Souter on, who he thought was a conservative, and he turns out to be a liberal. And then Junior Bush ends up putting John Roberts on, who's the deciding vote in Obamacare. Number one, can you ever be sure who you're nominating will be the true conservative? And number two, who do you like?
Great questions. The first question is it a good strategy to pick somebody without a track record and hope they turn out to be a conservative? Terrible strategy. 50% of the picks to the Supreme Court by Republican presidents have turned out to not be very solid when it comes to upholding the Constitution. That's why I like Brett Kavanaugh, Judge Brett Kavanaugh, because he has over 300 decisions on every issue under the sun. Everybody can read the opinions. You can see where he is. He upholds the Constitution in each and every case. And more of his opinions have actually become the basis for Supreme Court decisions almost 12 times than any other candidate. So he's got the track record, and that's what we need. John Roberts actually didn't have an extensive track record, and it was a mistaken pick.
Well, you know what I find? If you, Amy Coney Barrett, all right, the one woman who on a number of levels would be great. Number one,
absolutely,
because she is, number one, very young. But I think the most important point is that she was just confirmed by every Republican in the Senate and 3 Democrats. I think it's Donnelly, Manchin, and I forget who the third one is there. Donnelly, Manchin, and...
Heitkamp?
No, Tim Kaine. Tim
Kaine, that's right. Tim Kaine, yes.
So if this was just 2 years ago, how do they come back, these Dems, and say, well, we really didn't like her or we were delusional 2 years ago? Plus, I want to play some sound for you. I think we have it on her hearing.
Do you consider yourself an Orthodox Catholic?
I am a Catholic, Senator Durbin. If you're asking whether I take my faith seriously and I'm a faithful Catholic, I am, although I would stress that my personal church affiliation or my religious belief would not bear on the discharge of my duties as a judge.
You know, I play that because it seems that there was at that hearing 2 years ago, especially not just by Dick Durbin, but Senator Dianne Feinstein, there was a pushback saying that it seems that you're living the dogma of your religion as though her being a Christian is a problem. I think that tees itself up for a certain amount of people on her side saying enough of this Christianity stuff. Let's put her on. What do you think?
She has such grace to be able to sit there while those bigoted senators make it seem like being a practicing Catholic is a disqualifier to serving on the highest court in the land. It was a disgusting, un-American moment, but she had such grace. My only concern with her nomination, and I would support her wholeheartedly if the president picks her, is just that, once again, she's only been on the court for a short time, less than a year. We know where she is on a lot of issues.
She's on the Circuit Court of Appeals.
That's right.
I mean, we're not. Look, Elena Kagan went from Solicitor General to the United States Supreme Court. She was never a judge.
No, that's why I said I would absolutely support her, but I like the idea of picking somebody who has over a decade of opinions when you can really pick through them. We've made so many mistakes, Judge. Think about it. 50% of the picks to the Supreme Court by Republican presidents have been off the mark. We can't afford one mistake. Neil Gorsuch, a fantastic pick. We got to keep the streak alive.
Yeah, but you know what's interesting? Too much information, as in Bork, also creates a problem.
Yes.
You know, so I think it goes both ways, Matt.
The big difference is with Bork, remember, is it took a supermajority vote. This is the big difference. Because of what Harry Reid did,
yes,
it just takes 50 votes. And we have, as you pointed out with that excellent question, we have Democrats running for re-election in the Senate from red states. And if they vote against Trump's pick for the high court, I'm going to make a prediction. They ain't coming back.
It'll be fascinating. Matt Schlapp, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Judge.
All right. And still ahead, meet the man who says he couldn't take being a liberal anymore, so he crossed the aisle. And next, the left's attacks on the right reach out of control levels. Tomi Lahren and I are ready to discuss it. It's Tommy time next on Justice. Last week, you'll remember, I spoke with Michelle Malkin and Pam Bondi about some of their experiences with left-wing protesters who confronted and sometimes threatened them in public. Why does this thing keep happening? Joining me now to discuss that and more is Fox News contributor Tomi Lahren. Tommy, thanks for being here. You know, Tommy, you experienced your own situation. I have had situations like this as well. And right now, I still have not heard from anyone on the left who says, oh, it happens on both sides. It does. Able to identify someone from the right going after someone on the left and saying they, you know, don't like their politics, spitting at them, threatening them, telling them to resign, things like that.
Well, what the left believes is if you challenge their way of thinking and their worldview in an articulate manner, they believe that that's harassment. However, they can go out in public up to me at a restaurant, at a bar, in a mall, and confront me and say nasty things or throw things at me, and to them, it's one and the same. But, Judge, I gotta tell you, since Maxine Waters came out and she encouraged her followers and her supporters to, I guess, continue the attacks on the right, it's gotten worse. I've seen it in my personal life get worse in the last couple of weeks.
And you know, Maxine Waters, as crazy and batty as she sounds, I mean, she is creating this movement where people think it's justified. At first, it was like impeach 45, and people saying, yeah. And then it's like, you got to stop him. You got to go push back. You got to do this. And she never really apologized.
No, she didn't apologize, and she's actually making it very dangerous, especially for young women like myself. I find it funny because many of the people that have been attacked, harassed, assaulted have been conservative women. So where's the left on this? Where are the feminists that are about female empowerment, Time's Up, Me Too? Where are their voices in this? Because I don't see them coming out to defend conservative women as they should when we are literally being attacked for our beliefs. Well, where are the feminists?
They're not going to be there, Tommy. I'll tell you right now. They did it with hashtag grab your wallet with Ivanka Trump's items, where Ivanka Trump is the epitome of a successful woman who has spent her adult career trying to empower other women. I mean, it is a fraud. The whole thing is a fraud. But I want to move on from that, Tommy, to John Brennan tweeting today to President Trump. You are to governance and politics what Bernie Madoff was to the stock market and investment advice. The two of you share a remarkably unethical ability to deceive and manipulate others, building Ponzi schemes to aggrandize yourselves. Truth and justice ultimately caught up with Bernie. Now, here you have a guy, John Brennan, who is the head of the CIA, who, as far as I'm concerned, in my book that's coming out in less than 2 weeks, is part of the swamp that created and made up this anti-Trump collusion narrative, still going after the president. They're not afraid of us, but we are always under the gun from them.
Well, of course, and for me, what I see is actually just pure bitterness. It's almost like some of these former Obama administration officials, it's almost as if they're jealous that they're not part of a winning administration. I hear time and time again from Hollywood liberals, from former administration officials, how terrible this president is, but they give no example of how terrible he is. Terrible for whom? For illegal immigrants? For terrorists? For overregulation? Because for the average American, this president is doing wonderful things, and they fail to acknowledge it. I honestly think it's jealousy.
Well, and, you know, it's interesting. Donald Trump tweeted back, thanks to Republican leadership, America is winning again, caps, and America is being respected again all over the world because we're finally putting America first. You know, Tommy, I'm going to make a prediction. I believe that although historically the other party wins in midterms first presidential term, I think it's either going to be extremely close or the president is going to win the midterms with his party. Last few thoughts?
Oh, I agree, because the left is finally showing us who they really are. And it's things like what John Brennan is tweeting, and it's things like what liberals are doing in the streets to conservatives. All these things are piling up. And I think you're going to see moderates step out and say, again, walk away. We don't want to be a part of that party. I think you're going to see a red wave in November, and I think 2020 is going to be even better. So I appreciate that they're finally being honest about their beliefs, their ideology, and the way they treat people. It's only going to help us.
All right, Tommy Lahren, thanks so much for being with us tonight. And a special 4th of July holiday weekend edition of Street Justice still ahead. And next, you want fireworks? We've got GoPac Chairman David Avella and radio talk show host Chris Hahn ready to do battle on the panel. Justice rolls on in a moment.
Pyongyang slamming new talks with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, calling them, quote, regrettable and gangster-like. This despite Pompeo telling reporters that his third visit to the country since April had yielded a great deal of progress. Meanwhile, President Trump says he's nearing that big decision on his second Supreme Court nominee to replace retiring Justice Anthony Kennedy. The White House telling Fox News that President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence discussed it over dinner in New Jersey yesterday. Sources saying the president has narrowed it down to 4 candidates: Brett Kavanaugh, Raymond Kethledge, Amy Coney Barrett, and Thomas Hardiman. Mr. Trump scheduled to announce his decision on Monday. I'm Marianne Rafferty. Now back to Watters World.
I'm going to get one of those little kids. And in the middle of the debate, when she proclaims that she's of Indian heritage because her mother said she has high cheekbones. That's her only evidence, that her mother said she had high cheekbones. We will take that little kid and say, but we have to do it gently. Because we're in the Me Too generation, so we have to be very gentle. And we will very gently take that kid, and we will slowly toss it, hoping it doesn't hit her and injure her arm, even though it only weighs probably 2 ounces.
President Trump, as usual, having some fun at his latest rally in Montana, throwing down the challenge to the woman who could be one of his challengers in 2020, Senator Elizabeth Warren. Let's bring the panel in. Joining me now, radio talk show host, former advisor to Chuck Schumer, Chris Hahn, GOPAC chair, David Avella. All right, guys, thanks for being here.
Good evening.
Thanks, Chris, Judge. You know, if Elizabeth Warren does run, I mean, you know, her identifying herself as a Native American because she has high cheekbones, I mean, a lot of us have high cheekbones, is kind of an empty excuse for being or saying she's a minority, but then using that to gain a financial advantage with a school. That's not good.
I think the president talking about it on stage over and over again, first of all, is the most uncivilized thing I've seen. I've heard you talk about civility. That's ridiculous what he just did at that rally the other day. As for what she used for school, I don't know what her background is. We don't know what her family history is. And I don't think it's going to be relevant. And it also shows that the president keeps talking about her because he's threatened by her, because she is a strong, intelligent woman who would be a far better president than this man was, who understands things that he can't possibly comprehend. So keep on hitting her. All you're doing is raising her profile, and she would be a better candidate than you think.
David Avella, do you think Chris is right when he says that Elizabeth Warren would be a far better president than President Trump?
Of course she wouldn't be. And Chris must turn down his earpiece because he hasn't listened to what Democrats have said about Republican presidents every time one gets elected, whether that be President Trump, George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, or Ronald Reagan. You hear the same old tired old rhetoric about them being racist and them being sexist and them being against women and them being against the poor. Though it is worth noting that if you saw the survey results this week, you now have voters saying that it's Republicans who are more for the working class and it's Democrats who are for the wealthy and the elite and the business community. So people see through it, and more importantly than those comments about Elizabeth Warren, it's the rest of the president's message that matters, which is we're going to have secure borders.
Think it was appropriate?
We're going to have economic security. We're going to have personal security in this country, which he started in his first term, and he's going to continue in a second term.
Okay, go ahead, Chris.
I mean, David, I don't think you think it's appropriate for him to continue to call her, quote, Pocahontas.
He didn't call
from
her
the
Pocahontas
stage.
in that
Chris,
shot.
Come on.
He didn't call her
the president
Pocahontas.
of the United
She's the one, Chris,
States.
who started it.
Well, you know, the president of the United States continuing to poke at that is just unpresidential.
To poke at the fact that she said she was Native American and she can't prove it. What did he do? She's the one who said it. Used it for a financial advantage.
He doesn't know what she can or cannot prove, and it's not for him to decide.
It is no more absurd than this civic chaos that Maxine Waters and Tom Steyer and George Soros are all out there pushing as they try to impeach impeachment. But let me say this: Chris's team should continue to promote civic chaos, because every time they've done it, 1968, Republicans won 32 seats. 1984, when they pushed civic chaos, we won 49 states. Chris, let me finish. In 2004, when the Code Pink came out, George Bush won 31 states. So, Chris, continue pushing civic chaos. That will only ensure Republicans pick up seats in the Senate this year, and President Trump will be on his way to re-election in 2020.
Go ahead, Chris.
David, civic chaos was what happened in Charlottesville when a right-wing nut drove his car into a crowd and killed somebody. Civic chaos, people protesting, people standing up, people marching in the street who are agitated by the policies this president has done. That is not civic chaos. That's civic engagement, and it's good for America, and it's going to show in November. The blue wave is coming. We will both talk about it after the election, and if I'm wrong, have at me. But I will be having at you, my friend.
The gentleman this week that had his hat taken off and beverage thrown on him, that's civic chaos, Chris. It may be a smaller amount.
That's worse than the woman who died in Charlottesville,
Yeah,
right?
but you know,
the woman who died
David,
in Charlottesville. And then the president said there were fine people on both sides there. So let's talk about civic chaos. Let's put it into some perspective. I'm sorry Alan Dershowitz got disinvited from a barbecue on Martha Vineyard, but there are people dying because of right-wing violence.
You know, Dave,
well,
Chris,
there's people dying because illegal aliens are coming across the border and killing innocent Americans.
No.
Yes,
oh, they are?
Yes, Chris.
David, you know that's not true.
That is true.
That's true, Chris.
That is absolutely true.
You know that the crime rate, David, you're smart enough to know that the crime rate among illegal immigrants is the same as it is among everybody else.
Stop right now, Chris. You want to make reference to one killing? He can make reference to the number of Americans who have been killed by illegal aliens. Don't tell him no. Facts are facts. And on this show, the truth is the truth.
Judge, here's what we know. Chris didn't write the speech for his old boss, Chuck Schumer, who said in 2009 that people who come into our country without permission are illegal aliens, and illegal aliens shouldn't be treated the same as people who come here legally. The only difference is Chris and his team are now for open borders, and it started with Hillary Clinton when she went to Brazil.
No, we're not, David.
When she went to Brazil and told a group of American businessmen that she was for open borders.
Let him finish. She went to Brazil and what?
And she told him she was looking forward to having open borders between the U.S. and South American countries.
Okay, that's enough. Chris, go ahead.
It's a complete lie that Chuck Schumer's for open borders and that he doesn't believe that we should have a border and that we should be tough on immigration.
Chris, are you out of your mind?
We believe in having a process, and we believe that when people,
all of them wanted open borders, and they called them illegal
immigration. There was less illegal immigration under Obama than there has been under Trump, and that's a fact.
What does that have to do with what we're talking about?
So let's also be very clear.
You're telling me we're out of time.
We believe
Chris Hahn, David Avella. We can continue this off the record. Goodbye.